So, morning reflections that we're totally enjoying as a couple with two different types of Garmin watches. I have a Forerunner 265S, and Chris has a Venu 3. And so, every morning, most of the time, if we're getting up at about the same time, we're both like, immediately look at our watches and we're like, how did you sleep? And as a lot of you guys know, if you're my client, that this has been a good last year of a lot of health choices and changes. And this year is the discussion very strongly around alcohol. And so Chris and I have been fairly successfully, I'm going to say way more successful than in the past. And I think we're at this point, this is how our life is going to be. We're abstaining from any alcohol on a work night. So Sunday through Thursday night, unless there's a special occasion, probably not going to have alcohol. And so it was Friday. We were celebrating the end of the week, so to speak, also just called end of the week. And so we opened a nice bottle of wine and we drank it. And this morning we looked at each other and we said, how did you sleep?
Well, I thought I slept good, but my watch told me I didn't.
I woke up and I didn't feel so great. And I looked at my watch and it said, you slept like garbage. You screwed up an entire wonderful track record of a week of good sleep scores. I went from like the highest it had been was probably like 80, I don't know, 85. And I plummeted down to 50 something. What did you do?
I don't know, but it's funny because I would have told you that I slept fine last night, except my watch is like, you didn't. It was 60 something.
Which led us to another conversation, which was,
I always used to think that I slept good. I used to think that a good sleep meant that you were asleep. So, like, when we first got together and you would have these bouts of insomnia and you would be like awake in the middle of the night, I would think to myself, like, oh man, I sleep so good because that doesn't happen to me. And generally, this has always been true for me. Like, I lay down, I fall asleep, right? I don't have a hard time falling asleep.
she's got a gift.
I do have a gift. A lot of places I've slept before. But, like, if you were asleep, it was sleeping and it was good. Mm-hmm. And I think that 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when I was having all those problems with stress around my neck, and I went to that doctor and he said, how do you sleep? And I was like, fine. And that was like the first time that anybody had ever asked me, like, from a medical perspective, trying to really get at, like, how do you sleep? And he is like, you don't wake up in the middle of the night? And I was like, maybe sometimes to go to the bathroom, but generally no. And he's like, and you stay asleep and you don't toss and turn and you don't get hot. And he started listing all these ways. And I was like, oh no, well, I guess that happens. And that happens and that happens, right? And then I had this sense of like, well, I guess just the act of being in the bed and being, quote, asleep isn't enough.
Sure. And I mean, part of that is because that's what growing up we were told was sleep. Like there was no discussion, right? With with my parents, I'll speak with my parents of like, yeah, there was never I think the only time somebody said, how did you sleep was when the phenomenon of both of my parents had campers, and if we were camping someplace that had good nature, being from West Texas, that was a win. Then it would be like, how did you sleep? Because everybody knew they slept better, but there was no other discussion of how did you sleep. So we're not trained to think about that.
No, or it was like something that happened generally, like traveling, right? If you were staying at somebody else's house, the host would be like, oh, how did you sleep last night?
Or yeah, if you're at a hotel that has a crappy pillow or something like that. But like for years, we've not invested in it yet, but we've talked about getting an 8 sleep mattress cover, and part of it was that I was really interested in was about the sleep metrics. And here's the thing: I think we found something that people don't need to invest in a $3,000 mattress pad cover unless they need it for temperature regulation. So fine, because I'm a big advocate of the Garmin watches, and not until now I'm a bigger advocate of Garmin watches now because it's Chris and I both of our watches. These are newer watches in the last 2 to 3 weeks. Then I'm like, wow, this blows away our other Garmin watches. And we really didn't know what was going on with our sleep before these two watches. So this is a larger conversation. I was showing Chris my intensive consult supplementation that I recently made, trying to making the client experience better. And as we're looking at it, I mean, she was just saying that, some people just are not in tune with understanding, not just their sleep, but like maybe, what was your wording?
I said people don't always understand like mind-body connection.
There you go.
Like until recently, I was not good at like feeling my body, right? And so this idea of making some of the connections, like when we make changes, we might not notice them, right? So there's a little piece of me that thinks that, in drinking less alcohol, Like, we did drink last night, and I thought I slept fine last night.
Mm-hmm.
And so...
I didn't wake up all night. And I mean, that's what's interesting. I mean, I can tell a difference of clarity compared to during the week when we aren't drinking, waking up this morning. But I don't feel haggard or terrible or anything like that. But that also tells me...
We're not hungover.
We're not hungover, but no. But also I can see a different level of clarity when I'm getting to...
You're interrupting me.
Well, yes, that's because this is real life. This is why we're doing this. So, just if you're wondering what my life is like, no, but
mine.
But well, now I lost my train of thought. Your rage ruined my thought.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, I would have, and we didn't drink to excess last night, so it wasn't like we would have woke up hungover. And I think that's the important thing. Like, I could have told you 6 months ago when we go out, when we drink a lot, and you wake up hungover, generally there is terrible garbage sleep, and I could have told you that. I tossed, I turned, I didn't feel good. I had to get up in the middle of the night, which is different from last night, having just a little bit of wine. It was enough to mess with the quality of my sleep, even though I slept all night.
Right.
And that has been really eye-opening. Like, is it even worth it to drink on the weekends sometimes, right? And when you think about metrics, and like, I'm a person, I like streaks. I like seeing things. Like, I like doing a running streak. I like a good challenge, a fitness challenge, nutrition challenge, whatever. And so to see on my watch, like, these good sleep metrics, it gives you like a 7-day look, to see it be like way up high in the 80s and then take this nosedive because I decided to have 2 glasses of wine last night.
Yep.
It's annoying to me.
Well, I mean, I think what we noticed when we first started, like most things, even like with my clients that are using Lumens or with me, there's a calibration period. So even with these higher powered Garmin watches, there's a calibration period, right? With your heart rate variability, your sleep trend, etc. It's like learning you. I think what we noticed was that it takes time to get your score back, to get your body recharged. Yeah. And I think to me, that's the bigger question is how many days is it going to take for me to feel good enough again, like to be functioning at tip top for what I want to be functioning at. And mostly it's about cognitive, like I want high cognitive performance. We've already experimented with non-alcoholic things, and so far we've struck out. Chris had a sugar hangover from a non-alcoholic white wine. The red wine was so gross. I'm not saying it's all of them by any means, but one that was recommended. We wouldn't even make fake mulled wine from. It was so gross. And then we bought, I can't remember the brand. Ritual. Yeah, it's like their gin alternative, and it made Chris's tummy bloat like she was 6 months pregnant within 15 minutes of drinking it. So there's something in there that almost
doesn't agree with me.
Yeah, but it's not just you, because there's lots of people that are just like you that I work with, that it's almost like it's triggered like a SIBO effect, a small intestinal bowel overgrowth bloat phenomenon. So something in there is not highly agreeable. But I did order some Little Saints trials of their Saint Ember and Saint Juniper. And so those are on the way. We'll try those and see. And those are lion's mane, mushroom, nootropic-esque. So I'm very into that, if that's a good phenomenon. So we'll keep you posted on that. But sleep, man. My clients hear me talk about it, and I don't know if they really realize. I mean, I think every doctor should, on some level, be on their own journey or be able to speak to things. And I would rather be able to speak to these things and share experience, because otherwise it's like listening to the doctor who's doesn't do any form of physical activity telling you to work out. And it's like, how do you know? Like, what do you do? How do you know how it feels? So. Oh,
I have one more thing to say about sleep.
Sure.
Okay, so especially thinking about some of the old school ways, I used to think like, oh, good sleep is you stayed asleep. You didn't wake up. And so as we've been not drinking alcohol during the week, we've been substituting that ritual while we like watch TV, watch a show, with tea. And so it's funny to me, when I drink tea, I drink way more water, probably because the tea is hot and I have to blow on it for a long time. So I keep drinking my water. And the tea is not dehydrating us the way that alcohol does. Right. And so I have to wake up every night to go to the bathroom because I'm drinking so much more liquid and I'm not dehydrated. But I'm coming back to bed and falling right back asleep. Right? So even though it is a disruption to my sleep, I'm able to like bounce back much quicker because my body does not have alcohol, my heart rate isn't high, like
Right.
all those things that if I did have to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom from drinking, right, from drinking alcohol, I would come back, I'd toss, I'd turn, I'd not be able to get comfortable. Sometimes I like literally lay here and feel my heart racing.
Yep, same.
So, and those are
In the past.
the sorts of things that I just think like, I never learned how to feel my body that way. I'm sure those things were happening a year ago, but I didn't know that was alcohol's effect on me.
Yeah.
And now that I know, it's kind of hard to go back.
To appreciate the level of toxicity and like internal chaos alcohol can create, if you're not starting to pay attention to these things and it's like your usual norm, you're never going to be able to get out of the cycle and know what the other side feels like. And so I think, I mean, I'm sure it's grossly obnoxious to a lot of people who enjoy consuming alcohol. And I think this is how I probably used to feel, just speaking personally, people like, oh, it's so great not drinking it, da 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 da. And until you actually get to that space and also feel the benefit of kind of getting out of it, I mean, that's what I think the big deal is. Like, if you don't drink for a day and then you drink the next day, I'm not sure.
Not enough.
Yeah, I don't know that you're going to feel the impact, the benefit of it. I feel like there's like 3 paths for people as far as being in tune with their body. There's like people that are like, I ran over my foot and it hurts and it burns and I need to take care of it. Like kind of a normal response. Then there's people that's like, oh, a truck ran over my foot and, oh, I guess I'll deal with it someday. I don't know. Maybe it hurts. Maybe it doesn't. And then you've got the other people on the other end of the spectrum, so to speak, that it's like they feel everything. They felt the truck going over their foot before the truck ran over their foot. Like they're very sensitive, they're very aware, like, and so I think if that kind of like 3 possibilities of how somebody responds to their body in pain or otherwise, it's useful to all 3 to have outside metrics to know just how bad something is, also how maybe not so bad something is. And but if you're still only reliant on yourself, I think it's really hard. It's really hard to know if you're making an impact. We were talking about the Lumen even this morning. Many of my clients know Chris uses the Lumen, and it's been a journey. And I'm just gonna let you know, like, it's not like everything that Dr. B says to her wife sticks and lands all the time, but sometimes it does.
Who listens 100% of the time?
Oh, you're right. Okay. My point being that, like, so Chris said this morning, she showed me her Lumen and she's been getting 2. Like, it's a circle of 2s. And that's because of this conversation also around alcohol that we had a few weeks ago. If I care about this, not just for myself, but let's say Chris has her own goals and it's not about cognitive. And if I'm this aware of what can happen and how it impacts from a metabolic perspective, and I'm going to be a good spouse or try to be a good spouse, and the usual ritual is, well, this is what we do. We have a glass of wine together every night. And if I keep having a glass of wine and she doesn't want to, and then the temptation is there, then I'm not being a very good spouse, right? And so I'm going to tell you, at the beginning, I was like, are you sure? Maybe I can just have a glass of wine and you can do your tea and it'll be fine. And then it was just like, really think, like, the truth is you have to make a decision. And you also have to make a decision if you're going to support your spouse. So, and Chris was very nice and also was like, I'll make you tea. You don't have to get up. I'll make you your tea that you want. So, like, it's a little bit of a give and take. And, like, you have to think about these things instead of thinking of being... I was on board, like, very genuinely. And I started talking about drinking less alcohol or trying dry January, which we are now calling damp January. Probably about the beginning of December, maybe even like mid-November, because we went on a wine tasting trip at the end of November with Chris's family in California. But like just thinking like we should try this, and the conversation just got bigger and bigger and bigger. It's kind of, it's almost like quitting smoking for some people, but it's like a conversation you need to plan ahead so you can have success instead of being like, oh, today's the day we're gonna stop drinking. Like,
there's all sorts of articles around, especially around like damp January and dry January and the sober curious movement. Like we did not invent the wheel on like planning ahead.
No, not at all.
But the idea of like, let's do it tomorrow, especially if you drink regularly and it's a ritual, there's lots of things you need to replace that ritual with. Anyways.
Yeah. So Chris was also saying this morning that, you know, and actually last night we were talking about this too, that like it is a useful, I had a recent client say that she's actually enjoying using the Lumen because it like teaches her to remember to take a deep breath. like to have like it is almost like a central nervous system, like box breathing reset. And by doing her testing, it's this remembrance of like, oh, I need to breathe, I need to relax, I need to do a deep breath, etc. And you were saying that like something similar last night. Can't remember exactly what it was, but like,
Oh, I did a guided meditation on the Calm app. And it was like you tense and then release and tense and release. And so just thinking about like the feeling of doing that is, even though like I was like, why would you make somebody who's stressed out and already all like tighten things and release them? And it's like it's trying to get you to learn how to feel your body, right?
yeah, yeah. There's a doctor psychologist on Instagram that I follow, and a lot of her, and there's also a chiropractor that they talk about basically, really, in very scientific, nerdy terms, about how we manifest stress in our bodies, and it is very real. Well, the tie into the Lumen was the breathing and being, you saying it's good for the breath and all that. I say to clients, the truth is, you have no idea what your body's doing, what it's burning. You can think you know, but most of the time when people are starting to use the Lumen and they're starting to calibrate it, working with us, like calibrate it meaning they're just testing a lot. We're not trying to change anything. We're just doing a lot of testing. That they learn very quickly that they have no idea day to day, hour to hour, what type of fuel their body's using. And when they think it is. Oh, yeah. And then the bigger tie in of why we decided to record this was that
when you're making changes, and if it's losing weight or gaining muscle or even thinking like it can take a while to see those changes in your body. One, for somebody who might not be used to feeling their body like me, and I'm trying to get better at that, but like it might take a while before you notice that your sleep is improving, that you feel more restful. And so what I like about the Lumen is some immediate feedback, right? Even if I thought I slept good, one of the things I notice is that if I sleep very poorly, that my Lumen levels are higher because I'm having a stress response to not getting good sleep, right? Am I saying this right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? So I'll think like, I slept for 8 hours last night and I slept fine and I stopped eating early last night and I didn't have any wine. Why do I have a 3 in the morning, right?
Right.
So the Lumen is like a immediate feedback piece, and every body is different. So whether somebody else has a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or whatever is right, dependent on them. But for me, a lot of it is sleep related. The other thing is that like generally in the morning when I have coffee, I put my protein powder in it, which
and your creatine
and the creatine and then some cream. And if I wake up and I'm in fat burning mode and I put those things in my coffee, it's going to kickstart.
It's going to use that as fuel instead of your fat.
Instead of the fat. And so it doesn't seem like a lot, like, oh, it's just like 1 scoop of powder. It can't be that much, right? It can't be that much, or it's not that big of a deal. But every morning waking up for the last week and seeing that 2, and many times last week having a 2.
And you changed it.
So that's what I was going to say. So when I wake up and I see that, it's like, well, if my body is doing what I want it to do, even if I don't quote feel it, this is giving me data that's telling me this thing is happening. I'm going to skip the protein powder that has chocolate flavor, right? And the sugar or sugar. And just put a little bit of cream in my coffee, which is far less enjoyable for me taste-wise. But I feel good knowing that I'm doing something good for my body, right? But if I woke up and I saw a 3 or a 4, right, it does make me pause and think about it. Like, why am I in this space? What does that mean for me? And so it's like immediate feedback in a way that our technology encourages immediate feedback. And so it fits in that loop, but it's also really reassuring. And so now, after many weeks of this, I can see the difference, right? Like I wouldn't have seen the difference or noticed the difference in my body and how my clothes were fitting related to making changes, small changes, but small daily changes like that are making a big difference.
I mean, Chris and I joke because, there's one of my friends, and then Chris sent it to me too. And it's true, the meme, the funny person who's talking about the woman perimenopause, and it's like, you've got all these 27,000 things you should do to help your body for perimenopause.
That one is so funny.
And it's true. And this is where I tell people, and not just people, Chris and her goals, that like you have to pick a lane of how you're going to ask your body to respond. You can't ask it to do all things at the same time. So if you're listening to influencers who I don't necessarily disagree with, I think there's a place and a time depending on somebody's goals. Goals are what this is how I approach things differently in the clinic, is that I want to know what somebody's goals are. Because if you're just saying I need to be healthy and you're supposed to do all these things at once and blitz your body, that's not how your body works. It's just not how it, biochemically, you're just going to confuse it. So you pick a lane and you go after the first goal, and then you can get that domino down, and then you can go after the next goal. That doesn't mean everything's mutually exclusive, but from a biochemical perspective, you have to work on one thing at one time. And so I think she's a marathon. She's back to being a marathoner. There goes my life again. She was a half marathoner for a long time, and before that, she was a marathoner. And so that's her thing. She loves running. And so, you know, I think for years it's been really frustrating. Has it been frustrating for you that your body does not change in the way that when you see these, that crazy late 30 or early 40-year-old woman who ran her first marathon and qualified for Boston or the Olympics or something like that, like looking at her body phenotype, meaning the shape of her body and her leanness and her muscle mass and all that, and she just like went out and did this, versus somebody, you've been a runner for a long time and you're like, I don't understand that, how the phenotype is that. I run all the time. Why don't I look like that? No, like, it's not just about looks, but like it's about strength and fitness, okay, and how that manifests in the body. Like, I think for you,
I'm not a professional runner. I do not have hours every day to dedicate.
She wasn't either, and that's why it was even more frustrating.
Well,
I think when you were encouraged, you were like, "That's awesome," and also what?
Yeah.
And but because there's so much emphasis on gaining muscle, especially around perimenopause and such, that like in my age, that I think that there's a lot of women consuming a lot of extra protein and or protein at the wrong time of day. They don't know it and are also trying to lean out at the same time, decrease their percent body fat, and they're confusing their body. That was what was going on with you. I'm going to tell you in my clinical view, you were confusing your body. It's one thing to say cognitively, this is what I want from my body, this is what I'm going after, versus getting it to go there. And a lot of people are told, well, if you do this one thing, then yeah, it's all going to fall into place. When actually you're just confusing your body.
Well, and I'll also I'm going to help you.
Oh.
Tie it back to that video.
Okay.
Of the woman, like, do this, do this, do this, do this. Like, most people don't know what to do. The difference now from 20 years ago is we have everyone on the internet telling us what to do, right?
Yeah.
And many people are not qualified to tell us what to do, right?
Yeah.
They're influencers, they're not physicians.
And or they're already in a very elite body phenotype shape that when they say you do these 3 things, you can look like me, and it's like a total load of garbage.
And so I think that is what I appreciate about like the Lumen and the way that you approach things in your clinic and with your patients, is it's like, okay, here is your body, here is your resting metabolic rate, here is, right? Like, here's what your body can look like, how your body's going to change. And some of that is, and then making those adjustments nutritionally, exercise, based on a person's body and a person's goals, versus a generic internet being like, eat more protein. Or, right? I mean, there are some things we can all agree on. Don't smoke, drink less. But like, should I be lifting weights or should I be running? Or what about cardio and aerobic fitness? And I don't want to die of a heart attack, right? Like, there's all these things. And so doing the genetic testing says your body is predisposed to this sort of exercise. This is what you need more of. This is what you need less of. Those things are important versus just following all the things on the internet, which is hard. And I know that internet is not the only thing, right? Yeah. You could go back.
There's also good tips on there, looking at the research and stuff like that.
People were like, South Beach diet, like the following a particular path or diet or method has always existed. I just feel like it's even harder now because of social media. Yeah. Well, yes. And it proliferates all the things that we're being told what to do.
Yep. Might as well say full disclosure here. My clients hear me talk about aggressive lifestyle change, and Chris and I have had conversations about that too. We talk about this a lot. But we really do care about our health. We really like, this is actually very fascinating. We like seeing the impact in us. And we're 2 different sets of genetics, obviously. And so Chris actually texted me something. She's like, it just makes common sense, right? If you've got big goals, big aggressive things you want to change about yourself or how you feel, then it's going to take aggressive lifestyle change. Like, why would you think this big overhaul in your body is going to be able to be done simply with one fix? And that's true. So for Chris, this is the disclosure part. She sprained her ankle about 3.5 weeks ago or so.
3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago today. There we go. When I tell patients that, like, when we look at their genetics and I'm like, and I'm looking at their big intake questionnaire and I'm like, look, there is a very strong chance that you're over exercising, you're overdoing it. Your body's not responding. You're doing stuff. It's not because you're for lack of effort. And it's either the wrong thing or it's too much. And for Chris, this is my clinical view of this, is that she was forced into not running. She was forced into not being able to get up early in the morning and go running with her friends that she loves so much, which they're wonderful people. That pattern that she probably could not have broken herself out of and realized how powerful it was going to be, which was lowering her cortisol because she's not pounding her body on pavement almost every day, like a lot of days a week. You do that. I'm just going to say it. Having to cut that out because of her ankle. Changing what she's consuming because I think you were thinking of other ways to keep yourself engaged with your health, which is when you started looking at other ways that you could change things. So talking about her protein powder in the morning, though. Yes, I'm pro protein. Got to find the right time to give you the benefit for your goals. That little tweak. And then we have concept 2 equipment in the basement. And you started with your boot on, cycling and doing zone 2 cardio on our erg bike. So it wasn't just
and doing the VRT
and doing the
strength
variable
training.
and doing the strength training
like
very consistent
6 or 7 days a week, where before I would do it like I know I'm supposed to, but running is my favorite thing, and if I only have a certain number of hours in a day or in a week,
Right.
I devote most of it to running. So I do the strength training, but now I have more time because I can't go run, so I've been doing the strength training like 6 or 7 days a week.
So for Chris, so it became accidental aggressive lifestyle change, because that's what I'm getting at. It wasn't just to get you those lumens goals of 2s.
Yeah.
And just like, I should say this for anybody who's not aware. A lumen level 1 or 2 is saying that your body is predominantly using fat as the fuel source. 1 is a deeper level, 2 is slightly less. A level 3 is mixed fat and carbohydrate use for energy, and a 4 and a 5 is predominantly carbohydrate utilization for energy. And so we can get way more into the weeds another time, or you can just have a consult with me. We can talk about this. So that's the relevance there. So she's waking up, and at other times of the day, if she using 2s, that means she's using fat for energy. And as Chris knows, as my patients know, that's the goal. If you're trying to lose weight, that's the first thing that we've got to figure out is, are you in a natural weight loss phenomenon of utilizing fat when you're sleeping and when you're waking up? Most people in America are not.
The other thing I was going to say about this idea of like unintentional but aggressive lifestyle change was that I sprained my ankle, so it forced a lot of these changes, right?
Yeah.
Like a different sort of exercise. But the other thing,
Phil Miguel.
I was lucky and I'm grateful that happened over my winter break as a teacher.
Yeah.
So it also coincided with having the ability to get more sleep. So not only was I not getting up early to meet friends, to go running and do some of that, but I also didn't have to get up early to go to work.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I was in this period of like getting really good sleep, and that I know is good sleep because of my watch, but also sleeping for a long time because I wasn't getting up to rush out of the house. But now that school's back in session, I've had to think about, right? Like, how do I like how I felt when I was getting good, deep, quality, a lot of sleep. So how do I keep that now that I'm back in school and I don't want to say like forcing myself to go to bed when I'm not ready, but like you and I have had conversations about this. Like I want to be in bed by 10:15, and I like when we go to bed together and it's a nice ritual, but also like I'm going to bed because I will get up at 5:45, 6 o'clock to go to school.
Well, and this goes back to how I feel. Even for me, it would be hard for me to want to go to sleep when we were having wine with dinner most nights. That, if you're not familiar with Dr. Daniel Amen, he's a psychiatrist. He focuses a lot on neurocognitive health, Alzheimer's, dementia, addiction disorders, and I feel like I'm missing something here, but he is very in tune with longevity. And if you don't follow him on Instagram, you should. He is a fascinating, smart man. But I mean, he talks about, even with people who have ADHD, that like actually alcohol is like gas on the fire, even though for most people it kind of has a slowing sedative effect. For many people, for individuals with ADHD, it can actually make things the opposite. And so, and I always thought, oh, well, maybe that's true. And I think that, so going to sleep, that is something. But like, by not having wine, and when you're like, I'm tired too, instead of being somehow accidentally wound up. And also when I wake up in the morning, it's a much easier hit boots on the ground and get going. Cognitive. You can't, I mean, I understand 1,000% why when people get serious and they disappear for 6 months and they reset their life and everybody wonders where they went. And a lot of times it is getting rid of alcohol, and they're a different person on the other side. Also, their productivity level is on the other side. There's a lot to aggressive lifestyle change, and I understand for myself personally, I don't know who would want to work with a doctor that isn't trying to improve themselves as well. So it's not because I'm perfect and I got everything figured out. By far, I'm still figuring things out. But it's wonderful being married to somebody who also cares about health, because this would be a very lonely place for me. But she also challenges me in a good way, and me personally, and with whatever her goals are of thinking things through and trying to hack. And not hack in the sense of like cheat. It's actually more of understanding each person's body. I mean, that's what I've said it for years, that really everybody needs to be studied individually. Randomized control studies are wonderful for a lot of things, but when somebody's trying to take on their personal goals, where they're at in their life, their gender, their hormonal balance, like wherever they're at really truly in life, their stress level, their work, their kids, their sleep, it really does come down to what does each person need to do as a priority to get movement. Hey, Archie. It's a kitty cat again. I mean, I guess that wraps up this. I didn't think this was going to be basically a podcast episode, but I guess it's going to be. But aggressive lifestyle change. You've seen the benefit. I've seen the benefit. Chris, how long have you had a Lumen? Like, it's not like you just started.
A year. Over a year.
Yeah.
November of last year.
Yeah.
Well, November of 23.
And so there is not anything that she's experiencing that I have not said to her before that she is deciding to implement and try things differently because of this forced life interruption with this sprained ankle. Thankfully, there's Archie. Just because you have a Lumen and following what it says from the direct-to-consumer model, so to speak, does not necessarily always guarantee success. Like, there's more nuance to it all. Thanks for listening in. Morning Metabolic Chat on Accident. Bye.
Ooh, that's a good title, Morning Metabolic Chat.
There we go. We may have done something. Bye.